I was completely alone out there, deep in the northern Utah backcountry. The kind of alone where, once it gets dark, you're done seeing anything man-made. No porch lights, no distant traffic. Just trees, dirt, and whatever else happens to be awake with you. That's usually why I go out solo. I like the quiet. I like being able to shut everything off for a night. But it also means if something goes wrong, there's nobody else around to tell you it's fine. Or that you're imagining things. I lost cell service about a mile into the hike. I remember checking my phone out of habit and seeing nothing but no service. That's normal for that area, but it still makes things feel more serious when it happens. I picked my campsite because it wasn't obvious. It was tucked back just enough that you wouldn't stumble into it unless you were actually looking. Trees were close on 3 sides, with just a small opening for the tent. It felt private. That mattered to me. I ate, cleaned up, and put my fire out earlier than usual. I took my time with it, stirring the ash until there was nothing glowing. Once it was out, it got dark fast. I zipped into the tent and lay there listening to bugs and wind. That heavy quiet you only get when there's nothing else going on. That's when I heard what sounded like talking. At first, I didn't react, but then it happened again. Short bits, pauses, more than one person. I sat up and listened. They weren't close, but they weren't far either. Somewhere downhill, deeper in the trees. I waited for something normal to break through. Laughing, music, anything. Instead, I saw light. A steady orange glow through the trees. Low, flickering, definitely fire. That's when my stomach dropped. I hadn't seen anyone else all day. No cars at the trailhead, no other camps. And now there was a fire burning after full dark. Like whoever was there didn't care who noticed. My fire was out. My tent was dark. From where they were, I would have blended right into the trees. I stayed inside longer than I should have, watching that glow through the tent fabric and listening to the voices drift in and out. Sometimes it sounded like whispering. Other times, like everyone talking at once, but quietly. Then there was a sharp sound that cut through everything and stopped just as fast. I don't know why I decided to look. I slipped my boots on and eased out of the tent. I didn't turn my headlamp on. The fire gave off enough light to see where I was stepping. I noticed the smell before anything else. Not campfire smoke. It was heavy, and underneath it was something sour. Faint, but wrong enough that it made me stop for a second. I stayed low and moved toward the glow until I could see into the clearing. There were 5 of them, all dressed dark. Hoodies and jackets, hoods up. Regular-looking people. Nothing about them stood out. They stood around a fire in a loose circle. In the middle was a stump. On top of it was a small animal. A rabbit, I think. Its legs were tied with cord, stretched out flat against the wood. One of them knelt and said something quietly. The others answered together. Same words. Same timing. It sounded rehearsed. Then the kneeling one stood up with a knife. He hesitated for a second, like he was waiting, then brought it down. The sound was dull and heavy. Blood spread across the stump and ran down the sides. The rabbit kicked once and went still. Nobody reacted. Another person stepped forward and used their fingers to smear the blood into cuts already carved into the wood. Slow movements. Careful ones. The chanting started again. Lower now. Slower. Nobody sounded rushed. That's when I heard movement behind me. It sounded like someone shifting their weight. The fire flared brighter for a moment, and one of them lifted his head. He looked right at me. I don't know how he could see me. I was back in the trees. But I know what it feels like when someone locks eyes with you. And that was it. He didn't look surprised. He looked like he'd already figured I was there. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I backed away, then moved faster, keeping my footing, not running blind. I got back to my tent and zipped it shut, my hands shaking enough that I had to slow myself down. I sat there listening. No one followed me from what I could tell. The chanting continued like nothing had changed. That's the part I still don't like thinking about. I didn't sleep. Every sound made me tense. Once or twice I heard movement somewhere nearby, but it never got close enough to force a decision. When the sky finally started to lighten, everything went quiet. I packed up as soon as I could see. I didn't eat. I didn't linger. I just got my stuff together and started out. The trail passed right by the clearing on the hike out. In daylight, it looked normal at first glance, like a spot people had used before. The fire had burned down to ash and charcoal, stones still in place. The stump was exactly where it had been. Up close, I could see what I'd only guessed at the night before. The top of the stump was dark and soaked through. Symbols were carved into it, cut deep enough that you noticed them right away. Around it were remains, bones with bits of flesh still attached, fur matted and stiff. They were placed carefully, not tossed aside. There were candle stubs melted into the dirt, burned cord, boot prints overlapping around the fire, like people had moved around it for a while. And the ground near the stump was worn down in a few spots, smooth, like people had knelt there more than once. I didn't stay long. By the time I reached the trailhead, my truck was still the only one there. I sat in it for a minute before starting the engine, just trying to calm down. The smell stayed on my clothes the whole drive home. I washed everything twice. I don't camp alone anymore, and I never leave my fire burning long enough for anyone else to see it. Because whatever that was, they weren't improvising. They were doing something they already knew how to do.